Sonic Forces. It starts out with an intimidating cutscene where Eggman wastes my time ranting, planning against the heroes with a minion of his in a green tube like Archie had. Well, that cutscene was a waste of time. Tails cowers in front of robots instead of killing them all, long before the plot got even worse for him. There was no excuse for Sonic needing to save them. It's nice that he asked if everyone's okay, but he should know they are because they don't act hurt. Sonic gets faced with Metal Sonic and enemies that shouldn't be his enemies. I get to see Zavik get attacked. Sonic has trouble in the fight, and Tails says the readings are too messed up for him to help him. Sonic thinks he needs to know what's going on with that guy instead of simply thinking he can homie attack him enough times and win. It's not like it's the first time he's fought a fast enemy. He beat Shadow and Metal Sonic plenty of times. He gets a lot of slapstick and passes out. All because he had to fight 3 fast enemies at once, one that's faster than him. So apparently, all Eggman had to do to beat him all along was send 3 Metal Sonics after him. Well, that was depressing to see. Tails was impressed that one of them is faster than Sonic. Even though I'm pretty sure Metal Sonic's been faster than Sonic for 5 years because of his fire boost. So why is he surprised that Eggman would make something that fast again? His Eggmobile should be faster than Sonic at this point. How else can it not get caught up with instantly in the Unleashed boss fights? This scene's so dark I was reluctant to watch it. The story has text on a black background tell you something that would have been intimidating and epic to see after an entire franchise's worth of build-up. Way to squander it. Eggman's army took over the world because just Sonic was defeated. As if none of his friends are fast and able to fight robots. Tails is super fast, remember? Knuckles got through loops-de-loops too. Guess the Soul Emeralds didn't think this was that big a deal because it didn't involve its world. Because they didn't summon Blaze, who could have effortlessly taken Sonic's place and prevented the whole plot. The cutscene wastes my time with Vector and his friends whining about the fact that Sonic's gone, taking it way too seriously that there's robots that they kill in one hit effortlessly all over the place. There's the infamous line that Tails has lost it, and it's revealed that it's been 6 months. Eventually it turns out Knuckles is their new commander, and he gives out exposition to them. Knuckles introduces their new recruit to them, and underestimates his own strength hitting her back. He says he's happy to see his friends are alive, which is both nice and impossibly oblivious to how competent they are at fighting. I heard Knuckles wasn't mean to Charmy in the Japanese version. Also, he didn't say Tails lost it in the Japanese version. It's more like Tails went missing. Which doesn't really make any sense. How would he get separated from them and be too stupid to figure out where they are? He was too stupid to invent something to track them down? I guess it makes sense that with Eggman taking over the world, he confiscated all of his materials and destroyed his lab, and he has no way of getting materials and tools to invent things. Why was this cutscene a CG cutscene and not Eggman taking over the world? Why did it take so long for Knuckles to find out Sonic was actually trapped in a cell in space the whole time? He had a spy tell him that. Espio would be a great spy. If it was him, he'd say so. So why didn't he learn this from Espio? I assume the spy is someone we'll never see. Because otherwise, why wouldn't he just say the name of the spy? Tails apologizes for somehow not being able to fix Omega in 6 months. And he infamously cowers in front of Chaos Zero, who only takes a few more hits than a Badnik and went down easy. I get that he had a nervous breakdown from losing Sonic for 6 months, as him not knowing how to fix Omega proves. But this still makes no sense. Archie didn't make him become a wuss and isolate himself when he thought Sonic was dead for a year. Classic Sonic saves him. At first he assumes he's his own Sonic despite his slightly different color from Sonic. And everyone hates that he said he's that Sonic from another dimension, when he didn't think that in Generations, which he's recognizing him from. I heard that was a misinterpretation by Pontac and Graf after being told something. And it is. Tails 2 cleared it up later. Apparently he meant dimension of time. Who says dimension to mean other timeline? Like, I'm fine with Mania being another dimension, just don't have Tails say he's the same classic Sonic as before. Infinite talks like nobody actually would in a flashback where he bullies the OC and lets her live for no reason. When you think someone who talks as evil as him would never torture himself by letting someone live if his entire motivation is sadism. Because the same reason he kills people would also apply to killing her. Then why doesn't he spare everybody? Knuckles says Sonic's being tortured, just like in the Japanese version. When nothing in the conversation confirmed that an exact torture method was used. Sonic was only being tortured in the metaphorical sense that he was trapped in a cell, which logically would be like torture to him, if he weren't a massive creator's pet who just has to still be optimistic because Sega wants him to always look cool. Other continuities got the balance right by knowing that sometimes he should be relatable instead so we'll actually like him. Sonic's happily joking around in his cell with no indication that's all forced on his part to hide how stir-crazy he is. But at least there's no proof he isn't faking it. He's able to escape, and eventually I get to see Zabik fall over, though it turns out he's an illusion. But it was still just as satisfying seeing him get hurt. He worked for Eggman just fine in Team Sonic Racing, so they could have had it be the real Zabik and explained that he was brainwashed. But since people hate the Zeddy, it's good writing that he's an illusion. I just can't understand why hitting an illusion enough times would make it vanish. Surely force field hard light would be impossible to damage. Sonic has to save the OC from robots since she had no weapon. Inexplicably. You had to play as her earlier in the game, where's her weapon? Sonic selfishly takes it personally that no one asked how he was, and instead asked how the person who needed saving was, naturally. They run to the airship. Nothing interesting happens in the codec conversation. Knuckles says Eggman has a factory for weapons Sonic needs to destroy. I saw this already in Underground and Sad AM, and I welcome it here. Knuckles tells the OC to just make sure he takes good notes. It's out of character for Knuckles to be condescending to someone other than Sonic. When did he do that before? And I heard this wasn't in the Japanese version either. Then Silver somehow lets Infinite talk hovering in place instead of throwing a giant ball of stuff at him, or simply using telekinesis on him. Why do people barely talk about this? This is basically on the same level as the Tails cowering in front of Chaos thing. He's more powerful than Tails. Sonic keeps him from attacking Silver again, but they didn't save his life or anything, because this is a world where rings exist and people survive tons of slapstick without bleeding. Since Sonic ends up fighting with Infinite after this, obviously Sonic would have achieved whatever Silver did anyways. Which is apparently that he knocked a Phantom Ruby prototype out of him. They could have used any character as a punching bag, and they used Silver. It'd be insulting to Silver's character to think he needed Sonic's help for anything but a distraction. Sonic's conversation with Infinite is boring. They're both one note. Sonic is supposed to be boastful, but he's not supposed to be like that 100% of the time. Why is Infinite letting him talk so much? He took forever to make him fly away. Why did he make Silver fly in that direction? I guess it was so he could keep attacking Silver. Then why did he make Sonic fly in that direction? Infinite attacks Sonic and then is forced to be so stupid that he doesn't bother finishing off what used to be Eggman's main enemy, when I'm sure he has countless people he already killed. And he'd have known about Sonic before the world was taken over. And it was taken over because it wasn't there. If Silver came over to him while Sonic was distracting him, Silver could have used telekinesis against him, smacking him to the floor a bunch. Now I'm forced to assume Silver was too injured to join in the fight against Sonic to defeat Infinite. I'm sure he runs around just fine, looking totally uninjured after this point, so that's bullshit. Tails' conversation with classic Sonic is uninteresting. It's pragmatic of him to happily accept any Sonic as a replacement for his friends, but it's still jarringly weird, because most people would be reluctant to move on to a substitute. It almost makes his friendship with Sonic look shallower than it is. How is a version of Sonic with laryngitis and no boost in any way as good as the real thing? Like, he's just grinning and bearing it because it's this or nothing. But you'd think he'd be a little angsty. Infinite says the disposal of the Phantom Ruby prototypes is complete, and Eggman says it was defective. Infinite's impression on me is mostly that he's awesomely competent, but has a stereotypical personality that leaves no impression. How overpowered is Eggman that he can even make prototype magical jewels like the Phantom Ruby? I assume he makes them out of nanobots, but still. But it's like, if he could make them, why didn't he make them long before relying on the Phantom Ruby? Which just so happened to show up to him. Fans theorize that it's because it imprinted on classic Eggman and Mania, so it's just returning to its master. They really should have explained that in this game. I get to see Eggman call him out on letting Sonic live. I have to just assume Tails is talking too quietly for these two to hear him. He has no reason to risk it. The heroes smartly wait for him to leave before Classic attacks the Eggmobile. Why didn't I get to see him attack Eggman outright? There's no reason for him not to. I thought he took him seriously. He sure can jump high all of a sudden. He can't do that in the games. I guess it's implying that Sonic CD's cutscenes are more canon than the gameplay. I get to see the Eggmobile crash to the ground. How is he supposed to get away? It's more damage than it ever was in the classic days. Eggman wastes a bunch of our time. Oh, it can fly away. Then how did it crash to the ground? How is it able to fly away then? How does Eggman go on to do the rest of the plot? Wouldn't this require the heroes to let him get away for no reason? I guess it's because even after he took over the world, they still don't want to hurt him. Knuckles says Sonic and Silver need time to heal. They don't look like it and act like it. Amy says before that Eggman's army is broken through. Somehow. I'm forced to assume that some of the militia took bathroom breaks at the wrong time. So now some of them are pinned down by enemy fire. So Knuckles tells the OC to save civilians that we never end up seeing in the actual game anyways. Why doesn't Knuckles ever join in on the fight? Can't he use a headset like all the characters had in the Time Eater fight to give orders while fighting? It's completely out of character for him. Knuckles says that was impressive, and Sonic tells him great job, and Vector says nice moves, but then selfishly says he won't look good if he hogs the glory. This isn't really like him. Tails' one-sided conversation with Classic is boring. Why doesn't he ever say that he must have laryngitis? Rouge says the system's got strange lab readings and they're life readings from two people, so Knuckles tells the OC to check it out. I wonder why this took so long to happen. What was Rouge doing all these months? I shouldn't have to assume the lab was so well hidden it took months to find it. Wouldn't an invisible Espio stalking Eggman and have discovered everything he needed to in all that time? Knuckles really is an incompetent leader. Then I see the OC pick up a prototype Phantom Ruby. Tails flies over to Sonic and hugs him. And Sega forbids Sonic from hugging back like he really would. Instead he's too surprised to. Like, in all the years they've been friends, he's barely ever hugged him. Other than that, this seems a waste of time, with Tails being the only one who clearly is happy he's around. The heroes constantly remind us of Eggman's doomsday plan that's met for 3 days from now, like a combination of SC2 and Sonic Heroes. The more you keep explaining the same things, the less emotional punch they pack. I didn't take it seriously in the first place because it was so cliche and we knew he wouldn't succeed in it. A countdown wasting our time at the beginning of every cutscene worked for this in SC2, but personally I don't mind its absence as it was padding. But it wouldn't be if it appeared while the cutscene was going on. Knuckles takes his plan seriously because Eggman conquered the world already. Vector says Shadow's tearing through their troops. Knuckles says it makes no sense that Shadow's doing this, and Silver naturally assumes he's being brainwashed. So hopefully this means a lot of people assume that. Why didn't Knuckles already assume that? Why hasn't he already been told that or assumed that long ago? It is realistic for someone to complain about something that's been a problem for months. So let's politely ignore the fact that he's talking as if he just now learned about Shadow's betrayal for some reason. Instead of just awkward translation. Sonic asks Shadow what's the deal because now there's actually time to, and the real Shadow kicks the fake to one-shot him. Shadow thought to use Chaos Control, that's good. People were disappointed by not getting to have a boss fight with him. It'd only be cool if it was like the Generations one. It probably wouldn't be that different anyways, and it makes a lot more sense than Sonic somehow winning against a version of Shadow who isn't holding back at all. Because he logically would have just Chaos Control teleported him apart. Or teleported where he was standing. He's lucky he didn't take advantage of his super speed to run around him and hit him a bunch while he was talking. So it's more believable that Shadow beat him than Sonic. Because this guy isn't holding back out of arrogance. Sonic asks how a fake was even possible despite everything else he saw Infinite create. Why did Shadow need to explain to Sonic that Infinite's been creating illusions with no souls? His conversation with him is boring. Knuckles says he's gonna stage a full frontal assault on Metropolis, which is Eggman's major city in Sonic the Comic as well. I guess the reason they didn't choose Scrap Brain Zone is because the name sounded silly. I heard that this Operation Big Wave had a comical amount of losses to the point where Knuckles should be stewing guilt in IDW in the games after this instead of not caring. 80% of the troops were lost to Infinite. People didn't let him live this down. It's almost like Vector should have been the leader instead because he's actually smart. There's no way Knuckles would be the commander when he's only good at directly fighting things. It's like he was only given that job for his status as a member of Team Sonic and not for a logical reason. Well, nepotism exists, so it is realistic. What's not realistic is him still having the job after a week. I know Infinite's really powerful, but that's the point. Knuckles should have known that and not bothered with this. Then the cutscene wastes time showing the OC cower in front of Infinite when we didn't need this to know that he's a threat. All of the dialogue here is boring. I kind of like the effect of the OC remembering Sonic's encouragement, even if it is cheesy. It's cheesy because we have no reason to care about a mute, personality-less character. Infinite wonders how he got bested by the OC. Somehow this doesn't enrage him into killing her, despite him trying to do so earlier. And instead he leaves. Silver thinks the fake Shadow's as strong as the real one. I'm sure it wouldn't have used Chaos Control, so that's forced. Unless it did, there's literally no proof that it is as strong as the real one. Rouge tells the heroes where they have to go so they could try to figure out the secret behind the Phantom Ruby's power. Why do they think there's a secret behind it instead of assuming it's got its own power for no reason like all the other magical items they've seen? Tails accesses computer data, and I like the character moment that Eggman has tons of selfies. Why does he think there might be a weakness? Knuckles doesn't like sitting on the bench. Then why is he still the leader? Amy says Metal Sonic's been spotted in the city, and Sonic lampshades that they should have just used the real Metal Sonic or built more of them. Pointing out your plot holes doesn't make him go away. You'd think Eggman would have had the chance to make a Metal Sonic army if he's been ruling the world and sending robots everywhere for 6 months. It happened in Sonic the Comic. Sonic talks awkwardly, having relatable moments for once before fist bumping the OC. And Tails gets told great job. He says that if they stop the energy transfer, the Phantom Ruby will become useless. I thought it would have its own power. Instead, they have to use a computer to shut it down in Chemical Plant. With no Death Egg, the Phantom Ruby is nearly useless. Even though Sega didn't stop a comic from being made where Eggman used it with it just being in his hands, completely unenhanced by electricity. But apparently he needs a charge to work super well. That's creative. Knuckles tells Silver that sending the OC is a good idea because he's not expected. Sonic talks like a gangster by saying he's been waiting for a chance to bust some heads. That seems out of character. But he has every reason to have pent-up anger after being imprisoned for months. Rouge says to Tails that the weapon system of the Death Egg is down so it can be infiltrated. I get to see the new Death Egg explode. Amy says the Phantom Ruby's powers should be severely weakened by this somehow. You can't do this to Chaos Emeralds. Orbot and Cubot's dialogue continue the lighthearted nature of Eggman's humiliation. Why is he in Green Hill Zone still instead of a menacing base that reaffirmed that he's ruling the world now? Eggman hates nature. The cutscene's mostly a waste of time with all of his minions rubbing salt in the wound for him. But it's supposed to be happy because the Death Egg was blown up, so it's justified in context. Shadow wastes time stating the obvious just like all the heroes are doing. Rouge tells him not to preemptively celebrate when she's supposed to be an optimist. Amy's been a worrywart the whole game. It is realistic that something traumatic like Eggman taking over the world would change them though. But that's not explained, so Amy's just missing her whole appeal for no reason to be the generic girl. Most of the characters contribute nothing to the plot and just taunt. Why does Sonic just let Eggman taunt when he's taunting him? So Null Space gets summoned. And Eggman says that it was supposed to be his doomsday device against them. Sonic and the OC get sucked into another dimension. I already saw a black hole in Sonic Rider Zero Gravity. Eggman says he learned from his mistakes and had a backup power source because the heroes always destroy his power sources. This was already done in Sad AM, so it's nice to see him be as competent as that. Sonic gives credit to the OC for escaping Null Space. Eggman saying he'll still have the last laugh sounds lame, and Sonic lampshades the lameness of him talking in the third person and not anything else. The heroes waste my time saying they plan to go to the next level. Amy says Classic will have to be returned to his home dimension when the Phantom Ruby is destroyed for some reason when they have no reason to think this apparently. Tails thanks him for all of his help. And the story wastes my time with an epic, massive fight where the Sonic characters barely get to do anything. There was no excuse for flashes of light when Sonic was getting beaten up. There was a lot less fighting than I thought. They get to Infinite pretty fast and he blasts them away. Then he gets shot at by Omega. Who fixed him? Tails? No one explains who fixed him. I guess Tails fixed him off screen because he was feeling better. Or Wave did, but why did she take so long? Tails says while they're under the Phantom Ruby's control, the sun above them is a part of their reality. And Eggman says the sun is gonna fall on them and kill them, which would only actually be possible if the Phantom Ruby could even fake heat. It's an impressive threat of his, but why doesn't he bring it down on the heroes right away? If a fake sun was really having the effect of a real sun, they'd already be dead. Eggman didn't do that because that'd kill him too. Tails says the Phantom Ruby prototype only works for the one who activated it. And somehow Tails says that Courage activates it by itself. Well, it is a magic crystal, so why not? I don't think he's right though. The Phantom Ruby wasn't activated for Eggman in Sonic Mania because of his courage, was it? He runs away from Sonic. What's causing him to say all of this just now? Why isn't everyone blind? I guess the fake sun isn't too bright because that blind Eggman too. I guess the reason I can't take this seriously is because nobody immediately points out that if it was really like the sun, it'd be a lot worse. The fake son vanishes because of the OC's prototype. Tails plans to help him up as he calls Eggman a bad scientist for having a mistaken assumption. Why did any prototypes still exist if he ordered all of them destroyed? I guess the reason Infinite had one was because he was on his way to bringing it to someone who would destroy it. Because if he could destroy it, he would have done it already. Wouldn't he think it was worth it to have them anyways, because the prototypes would only be in the hands of his side? Nothing interesting to say about Sonic and Infinite's bragging to each other. It's satisfying to see Infinite complain that he got defeated. He disappears, and Eggman confronts Sonic with generic epic music playing. It makes sense that Eggman's the final boss thematically since he took over the world in this game. Eggman says the Fortress Reactor was a decoy, and he was smart enough to have a backup mecha to fight the heroes. IDW has to believe he's incapable of being this smart. He put the Phantom Ruby in this thing. So now the Phantom Ruby no longer has a vulnerable energy source. It's so distracting that he calls this thing the Death Egg Robot, when he's already had tons of other robots in the Death Egg before. I'd expect this to be the name of the final boss of Sonic 2, or Sonic 4, and he doesn't call this Mark 3 for some reason. Also, did he seriously call it the Death Egg in Sonic Forces, instead of the Death Egg Mark whatever number Death Egg it is? Speaking of that, at one point in the game, Sonic actually remarks that he keeps making Death Eggs, proving that the classic games are still a part of its past. It's implied that everyone in the army was fighting the whole time, and the illusions disappear. They didn't really contribute by fighting them though, right? I'm not told they were keeping the illusions away from Sonic. They could have just gone home and stopped wasting their energy. So this isn't epic. It reminded me of Worlds Collide from the beginning, so I was expecting to see more fighting. Tails sees Classic vanish as sad music plays, and Sonic puts his hand on his shoulder, reassuring him with false hope, and everyone rolled their eyes at Sega with this line. He says his friends need to fix the world, and Tails says something out of character to try too hard to look cool. And it's cheesy that the heroes look at the camera. Why is there a cutscene after this just to have the OC somehow silently tell the heroes that she's leaving them? The rest of the scene is devoted to the heroes flattering the OC one after another.
Hold on! There's still a lot we need to do. We're just getting started.
Shadow's in the room with the others with nothing to gain, proving he does appreciate their company in canon IDW. Shadow is in character the entire game, not like he was in IW or even Generations. Sonic says he and the OC are no different despite the OC never bragging and being a coward earlier. And the story ends with me wondering why the OC decided to stop hanging out with the heroes. Logically, if Tango refused to stop, so would she. Maybe it's because she was tired of being constantly condescended to. Because it's not like Tango was constantly referred to as Rookie. Now for episode Shadow. It flashes back to a month before Eggman's rule. Rouge says a report from the Intelligence Division located a place full of robots as one of Eggman's bases. She also insists on saying "do it to" it out of nowhere, even though only Sonic would come up with a motto so lame. So whoever wrote this was aware of Sad AM. She also references chili going well with hot dogs. We see Shadow seeing Infinite boast that he's better than a powerful robot, and Infinite calls Omega weak. Why is this the first cutscene these two have together in episode Shadow? The whole point of it is to be a prequel, so why doesn't it start with when he met Shadow while we're at it? After Infinite starts to remind Shadow of their first meeting, eventually Infinite's told his defense squad is useless because Shadow destroyed it. It's jarringly dark to just casually reveal that. So why doesn't Shadow kill Eggman if he's fine with killing? Shadow easily beat Infinite because he constantly used Chaos Control. This guy is way smarter than the imposter Shadow in IDW. There's the infamous scene that makes Infinite look pathetic, and everyone makes fun of it already. Of course, in theory, it's a good idea to add depth to his character, but there was a better way to do it. The rest of the scene after that is boring. including the rest of his conversation with Shadow in the codec. It's lame that he says take this and we don't get to see anything. He should have said that in a CG cutscene that'd show when he used an illusion to disorient Shadow. So how did Shadow ever break out of that? Logically, how'd he come back to seeing reality? If he could do that because he's that awesome, why didn't he instantly do it? Most of Infinite's dialogue is such boring boasting. There's literally nothing to it. And he's stuck talking to the most boring character instead of having someone entertaining to bounce off of. Someone where you never know what he's gonna say next. Rouge calls Shadow, warning him about something that would have had any sort of impact if we got to see it. There's nothing to say really. She just warns him to get over there, and then it ends with repeating the darkest cutscene in years for no reason, instead of explaining where the hell the real Shadow was and what was keeping him from getting here. I'm forced to assume that his chaos control was very short range without an emerald, or he was busy running around the wrong area because he wasn't told exact coordinates of where to go, and it'd have to be a huge area for him not to get to Sonic in time with his speed. Or he was sitting to the left of those buildings, tied up. I don't feel like I had anything to add about episode Shadow that wasn't already said. It's just more reminding me of how Shadow's supposed to be. It's the best characterization he's had in years, but it means he's boringly emotionless as usual, so I can't get excited. Looking back on it, I'm fine with most of the story of the game, which is something I can't say about the vast majority of 3D Sonic plots. It's the best 3D Sonic plot there's been in a very long time, and while it can be boring, I've seen a lot more boring and frustrating stories than this. I still feel like the plot's unappealing because of how dark its premise is. But since he had robots all over the world and unleashed, he didn't need to take over the world to send robot armies all over the place. Most of the plot could have happened without Eggman taking over the world. It just ended up being shock value. Even before I watched these, I always thought Eggman didn't deserve to get to do this because he's not only a jerk, but he's not competent enough either. Or if he is, he's vastly outnumbered by extremely powerful magical beings. It's not like Sonic and his friends are 5 years old. And he didn't really earn it because Infinite got him that. And we never find out how he did first encounter the Phantom Ruby in Infinite. One of the cutscenes contradicts one of the comics, so I'm not even sure the comics are canon anymore. We don't find out how his ruling of the world affected its citizens, when one CG cutscene of them or codec conversations could have told us that, so there's no excuse. And he's always seen outside instead of in the comfort of a menacing base, even though he hates nature, so it feels like nothing has changed. Aside from the first sentence of my summary, I could have typed all of this without even watching all of the cutscenes first. So the only thing that watching them for myself has done is told me that the plot is almost okay. My only big problem with it is ultimately a matter of opinion because a dark element doesn't ruin a plot for everybody. And you can get all of the experiencing out of the game Eggman would rule the world you could possibly want by reading Sonic the comic. Even Infinite being a paper-thin stereotypical character is a nitpick, because most Sonic villains are like him and get a free pass over it. And if he was deep and sympathetic, that'd miss the point because we're supposed to hate him and see him as a threat. He's more a plot device who could have been filled by a robot than a new character, until the DLC where even the threat part is undermined. Of course, I still found him to be really boring, so my complaint is that he should have had far less dialogue.